Originally, this was going to be a fiery call-out to Cathode Ray Dude's almost flippant comment about why he doesn't collect Mac stuff. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, honestly, that's fair. If you don't have nostalgia for old Macs, you just don't have it. It's very similar to me trying to enjoy Amigas. I never used them back in their heyday, and I feel similarly about every good game on the platform appeared elsewhere and was better. Sorry, Retro Amiga fans, I don't have nostalgia for the Amiga. What I do have nostalgia for, though, is classic Macintoshes. Now, I talk a lot about PC stuff on this channel, but I grew up in an Apple household. We started with Apple IIs, but it wasn't long before my dad started dragging a Mac SE home from the office a few nights a week and plunking it down on the kitchen table. I will never forget that machine's boot chime, or the amber hard drive LED blinking away inside the little tiny window in the upper expansion bay. I loved that machine. While I loved the games that I played on the Apple II, games like Dangerous Dave and Lode Runner, the games on the Mac were much more sophisticated. Crystal Quest, Glider, Oxide, Chuck Yeager's Air Combat. For years, my computing world was laser-sharp monochrome graphics, and honestly, it was a good time. If I ever come across another SE FDHD, I'm gonna pick it up in a heartbeat. I know it's not the best compact Mac, but it's the one I knew and loved for years. Years, that is, until my dad got lucky. One day, he came home with a complete Mac 2 CX. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary for him. He's extremely good at socializing and would frequently be recognized on family vacations by random people he worked with, or turn up at the house with random stuff he acquired for ridiculous prices. In this case, that day, he showed up with this complete desktop publishing setup and swore up and down that the guy he got it from hated Macs and sold it to him for all of $1. Just walking in with a functioning Mac 2 of any kind for $1 would have been impressive, but this thing was kitted out. It had 16 megs of RAM, a raster ops display card, I don't know the model, just that it would display raster ops every time it booted, and an enormous, for the time, 19-inch grayscale 2-page display from, I think, Radius? I remember it had a BNC connector on the back for signal input, and I've never seen anything like it before or since. He parked this monstrosity in his office, and I would hop on it every night after school because I'd have several hours to myself before he'd get home from work. This was the computer I used to teach myself programming using HyperCard. It was also the computer I used to do most of my video game discovery on. Anyway, this video is part of Macintosh, a celebration of classic Macs by the retro community. It's going to be a pretty chill video. I just really want to show off what Mac gaming was like before DOS could do decent graphics. Most of these games are from like 1987 to 1990, and in keeping somewhat with the original intent of this video, a lot of these games didn't make it to other platforms or had very few ports or port attempts as macOS transitions to OS X, where most of them died off with the Intel transition. Let's start off with probably my favorite game here, Crystal Quest. First released in 1987, Crystal Quest is, in my mind, possibly the perfect embodiment of what a black and white Mac game can be. It's simple enough to run on a Mac SE with its anemic 8 MHz 68000, but its sharp monochrome graphics and frenetic gameplay highlight why the Mac was such a revolutionary machine in 1984. The sound effects in this game are absolutely unhinged, but personally, I think it matches the gameplay in later waves, which becomes just as unhinged. Surprisingly, this game is still available from Game Mechanics, and once I get my Mac Mini up and running, I'll be picking this thing up. And next up, I want to slow things down a little bit and talk about Tesserae. Tesserae is a tile matching game, and like most, it depends on you matching tiles in a play grid. However, unlike most tile matching games, the tiles you control on the board change and evolve as you move them around. Tesserae was released in 1990 and supported color max right out of the gate. However, it also has a black and white mode that uses the tile's etchings to indicate pairs and combinations, making it quite playable for people with color blindness as well. Tesserae is a pretty chill time if you play casually, although of course if you really dig into it, it can prove extremely difficult to master. Arcade games and puzzle games were a lot of early Mac games. Crystal Quest wasn't the only arcade experience in town, there were also games like Pear Arena and Spectre appearing on the system. Similarly, Tesserae was far from the only puzzle game on the Mac, with Weltris and Shanghai Mahjong being two extremely popular and long-running examples. But the games I really liked to play sorta treaded the line between puzzle and action. They were action games that kept you on your toes or made you really think about your environment on the fly. Looking back now, this is clearly the reason I fell so head over heels in love with real-time strategy games later in the 90s. Anyway, two of these action puzzle games I sunk a lot of time into as a kid were Oxide and Glider. Glider especially. We had version 4 with the construction kit, which allowed you to make your own levels. I spent hours messing around with the level editor, figuring things out and trying to figure out how the game actually functioned. Glider is a side-scrolling arcade puzzle game first released in 1988, where you pilot a paper airplane and have to try and escape the house. Said house contains a number of traps and treasures, including helicopter and paper airplane foes, rubber bands you can shoot down said foes with, air vents and candles that provide you with lift, and air ducts and staircases that whisk you from room to room and floor to floor. Glider is still available on the Mac App Store, and in 2016 was open sourced, with the source code available on GitHub. So that brings me to Oxide. Oxide? Oxide? It's a game where you control a very shiny black marble, and you need to re-enable oxygen generators on your home planet to make it habitable again. These generators, the oxides of the game's title, open in pairs of matching colors or patterns if playing in monochrome. Oxide's a pretty fun game with excellent mouse-based control of your marble and puzzles that ramp up very quickly in difficulty, but never really becoming boring. Oxide started its life on the Atari ST and then was ported to the Mac, Amiga, and DOS in 1992. In the intervening 30 years since it was released on the platform, an open-source re-implementation has popped up called Enigma, which is able to load and play the original Oxide levels, giving the game a mind-bending 2,500 levels to complete. Best of luck! Lastly, I want to talk about a game that I only got to experience in its fullest form twice. Bolo. Bolo began development on the ARM version of the BBC Micro back in 1987, before being released for the Mac at some point afterwards. The dates are a little fuzzy on this one, but it was released sometime between 1987 and 1989. Keep those dates in mind, 1987 to 1989, when I tell you what Bolo is. Are you ready? Bolo is a graphical, mouse-based, up to 16-player, drop-in, drop-out, zero-conf networked combat game with base building running on AppleTalk, Apple's media-agnostic network protocol for early Macs, including the Internet. Yes, really. It doesn't look like much in single-player mode, but get 3 or 4 people together on a map, or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10? It gets frenetic fast. A proper multiplayer Bolo game is incredible fun. Fortunately, for all of you watching, Bolo lives on in the present day with Win Bolo and Lin Bolo, and even appear to have the original author's blessing, a Discord server, and everything. It's been many, many years since I last looked at the Win Bolo project, and it looks like it has finally matured into a modern port of Bolo. And that makes me really happy, because there's nothing more fun than blowing up tanks on a network with your friends. Don't you agree? Let me know what you think about these games in the comments below, and let me know if there are any modern ports that I missed. I'm sure there are. Also, are there any games that you loved to play on your classic Macs from back in the day? Tell me all about it. I'd love to hear from you. If you could be a dear, and click that like button if you enjoyed the video, or subscribe if you'd like to see more retro tech from moi, I would also be awesome. Thank you so much for watching Tech Ambrosia. My name's Amber. Have a great night.